Eleanor Wells woke up to the sound of dripping water. Again, the bathroom leak she had been ignoring for days was getting worse. At 64, she had learned to handle many things on her own since Tom passed away 2 years ago, but plumbing remained a mystery. With a sigh, she picked up her phone and called the number her neighbor had recommended. "Valley Plumbing, how can we help you today?" A friendly voice answered. "I have a leak in my bathroom that won't stop," Eleanor explained. "Could someone come today? We have an opening this afternoon. Our plumber Jack can be there around 2. Eleanor spent the morning tidying her already neat house. She rarely had visitors these days. Her children called often but lived in different states with families of their own. The house felt too big and too quiet most days. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Eleanor smoothed her blouse and opened the door. The man standing there was tall with broad shoulders, wearing a navy blue uniform with Jack stitched on the pocket. He had kind eyes and salt and pepper hair that reminded her of Tom in his later years. "Mrs. Wells? I'm Jack Miller from Valley Plumbing," he said with a warm smile that reached his eyes. "Please call me Eleanor," she replied, stepping aside to let him in. "The bathroom is this way." As Jack inspected the leaking pipes under her sink, Eleanor found herself watching his hands, strong and capable, with neat, trimmed nails. It had been a long time since she had noticed such details about a man. "Looks like you've got a worn-out washer and some corrosion on the pipe joints," Jack explained, looking up at her from his crouched position. "I can fix it today, but it might take a couple of hours." "That's fine. Would you like some coffee while you work?" Eleanor offered. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the mug, sending an unexpected warmth up her arm. How strange to feel such a thing at her age, she thought. As Jack worked, he chatted easily about the unusually warm spring they were having. His voice was deep and pleasant, filling the quiet spaces of her home. Eleanor found herself sharing stories about her garden plans and asking about his work. "Been plumbing for 30 years now," he told her. "Started right after high school, never wanted to do anything else." "It must be satisfying to fix things," Eleanor said, "to make something work again." Jack smiled. "That's exactly it. Most people only see the broken parts, but I see the potential to make things right again." The repair took longer than expected. The old pipes needed extra attention, and Jack was careful with every detail. When lunchtime passed, Eleanor made sandwiches without thinking twice about it. "You didn't have to do that," Jack said when she brought the plate to the bathroom doorway. "It's nice to have someone to cook for," she admitted, "even if it's just sandwiches." They ate together in her sunny kitchen. Jack told her about his grown daughter in Colorado and his dog, Max. Eleanor shared stories about her teaching days and her love of mystery novels. The conversation flowed easily, without awkward pauses or forced topics. "You remind me of my late husband," Eleanor said suddenly, surprised by her own words. "He could fix anything too. The house hasn't been the same without his touch." Jack's eyes softened. "It's hard losing that partnership. I've been divorced for 8 years now. You get used to having someone to share the little things with." When Jack finally finished the repair, the afternoon sun was casting long shadows through the windows. Eleanor felt oddly disappointed that his work was complete. "I've replaced everything that needed fixing," he explained as he packed his tools. "But these old houses sometimes have surprises. Don't hesitate to call if anything else comes up." At the door, Eleanor handed him a check, their fingers brushing again. This time she was sure he felt it too, a small spark of connection neither had expected. "Thank you for the conversation and lunch," Jack said, lingering at the doorway. "It was the best part of my day." After he left, Eleanor stood in her quiet house. For the first time in 2 years, she noticed the silence. She walked to the bathroom and turned the faucet, watching the water flow smoothly without a single drip. Something else had started flowing too, a feeling she had thought was gone forever. A week passed, and Eleanor found herself thinking about Jack more often than she would admit. She caught herself daydreaming about his kind smile while gardening or remembering the sound of his laugh while washing dishes. It felt silly at her age, but also strangely nice. On Friday morning, she was pouring coffee when she noticed a small puddle under her kitchen sink. She crouched down and touched the wet spot. Was it really leaking, or was she just hoping for a reason to call Valley Plumbing again? Eleanor debated with herself for nearly an hour before picking up the phone. "Valley Plumbing," the same friendly voice answered. This is Eleanor Wells. I had some work done last week, and now my kitchen sink is leaking, she explained, hoping her voice didn't reveal her nervousness. We can send someone today. Would you prefer Jack again? He's available this afternoon. Eleanor's heart skipped. Yes, that would be fine. He's familiar with the house already. She spent the next few hours cleaning and changing her outfit twice, finally settling on a light blue blouse that her daughter once said brought out her eyes. She even put on a touch of lipstick, something she rarely bothered with these days. When Jack arrived, his smile seemed even warmer than she remembered. Having trouble with the plumbing again, Eleanor? It seems that way, she said, leading him to the kitchen. It's under the sink. Jack set down his toolbox and crouched to examine the pipes. It's just a loose connection. Easy fix. Eleanor felt a flash of embarrassment. Had she called him for nothing? I'm sorry to bother you with something so simple. Never apologize for calling a plumber, Jack said, looking up at her with those kind eyes. That's how I pay my bills. As he worked, Eleanor made tea and placed a plate of homemade cookies on the counter. I baked these yesterday. Would you like some? Homemade cookies? Now that's something I haven't had in years, Jack said, standing up after tightening the pipe connection. They sat at her kitchen table, and Eleanor found herself staring at his hands wrapped around the teacup. His wedding ring was gone, leaving a faded line on his finger. Do you live alone? She asked suddenly. Jack nodded. Since the divorce. My wife, ex-wife, moved to Florida with her new husband. I've got a small house across town, just me and Max, my golden retriever. I have this big house all to myself now, Eleanor said. Tom and I bought it to raise our family, but now it feels too empty sometimes. Jack's eyes met hers. That's the hardest part, isn't it? The quiet. Yes, Eleanor whispered, exactly that. Jack told her about his 30 years of marriage, how they had grown apart slowly, and how he was still learning to build a life alone. Eleanor shared stories about Tom, their happy decades together, and how lost she felt after his death. I was so angry at first, she admitted. Not at him, but at being left behind. Jack reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. That's normal. Grief isn't just sadness. It's everything all mixed together. The conversation flowed from serious topics to lighter ones. Jack told funny stories about plumbing disasters, and Eleanor shared amusing tales from her years as a school librarian. They laughed together, and Eleanor realized how long it had been since she had truly laughed. Before leaving, Jack walked around her kitchen, opening and closing cabinets. He stopped at one that made a squeaking noise. Without being asked, he took out a small oil can from his toolbox and fixed the hinge. You didn't have to do that, Eleanor said. I like fixing things, Jack replied with a shrug, especially for nice people who feed me cookies. At the door, he hesitated, then pulled out his business card and wrote something on the back. This is my personal number. If anything else needs fixing, big or small, you can call me directly. Might save you some time. Eleanor took the card, their fingers touching briefly. Thank you, Jack. It was good seeing you again, Eleanor, he said, his voice softer than before. After he left, Eleanor held the card to her chest for a moment before placing it carefully by the phone. That night, she slept better than she had in months, dreaming of warm hands and kind eyes. In the morning, she found herself looking at the kitchen sink and wondering what else in her house might need fixing. The leaky faucet in the bathroom, the sticky window in the bedroom. She smiled to herself, realizing for the first time in years she was looking forward to tomorrow. Over the next month, Eleanor found several more reasons to call Jack. A dripping shower head, a toilet that ran too long, a garbage disposal that made strange noises. Each time, Jack came promptly, fixed the problem, and stayed for tea or coffee afterward. Their conversations grew longer and more personal with each visit. One evening, Eleanor was checking her mail when she found a thick cream envelope. Her daughter Lissa's wedding invitation had arrived. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, running her fingers over the embossed letters. Lisa and her fiancé David had been planning this for a year. The wedding would be in just 6 weeks. Eleanor felt a mix of happiness and dread. Of course she was thrilled for her daughter, but the thought of attending alone made her stomach tighten. It would be the first big family event since Tom died. All those pitying looks, all those awkward conversations, her former in-laws would be there too. asking uncomfortable questions about her life now. She was still staring at the invitation when her phone rang. It was her daughter. "Mom, did you get it?" Lisa's excited voice came through the phone. "It's beautiful, honey," Eleanor said, trying to sound as happy as she should be. "Are you okay? You sound strange." Eleanor sighed. "I'm fine, just thinking about seeing everyone." "Oh, Mom." Lisa's voice softened. "I know it's hard without Dad, but we all want you there. You don't have to stay the whole time if it feels too much." After hanging up, Eleanor poured herself a glass of wine. She looked at Jack's business card on her counter where she had left it within easy reach. Before she could think too much about it, she dialed his personal number. "Eleanor?" Jack answered, sounding pleased. "Is something leaking again?" "Actually, everything's working fine," she admitted. "But I was wondering if you could come look at my dishwasher. It's making an odd noise." The next day, Jack arrived with his toolbox. Eleanor led him to the kitchen, feeling guilty about her made-up problem. "I don't actually hear anything unusual," Jack said after listening to the dishwasher run for a few minutes. Eleanor felt her cheeks grow warm. Maybe it was just a one-time thing. Jack smiled gently. "Eleanor, did you call me here for something else?" She took a deep breath. "Would you like some coffee? I made cookies again." They sat at her kitchen table, and Eleanor gathered her courage while Jack talked about his day. The wedding invitation was still on the counter. Jack noticed it. "Someone getting married?" he asked. "My daughter Lisa," Eleanor said. She twisted her napkin in her hands. "The wedding is next month in the city." Jack nodded. "That's wonderful. You must be excited." "I am," Eleanor said quietly. Then she looked directly at him. "Jack, I have something to ask you. It's going to sound strange." His eyes were warm and curious. "Go ahead." "Would you?" Eleanor paused, hardly believing what she was about to say. "Would you consider going to the wedding with me? As my date?" The words hung in the air. Jack's eyebrows raised slightly, and Eleanor immediately regretted her boldness. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "That was inappropriate. I shouldn't have." "Eleanor," Jack interrupted softly. "Why do you want me to go with you?" She looked down at her hands. "The thought of going alone terrifies me, facing everyone, answering their questions about how I'm doing on my own." She looked up at him. "But it's not just that. I enjoy your company. I feel comfortable with you in a way I haven't felt with anyone since Tom." Jack was quiet for a moment, and Eleanor was sure he was trying to find a kind way to say no. "I haven't worn a suit in 8 years, he finally said. "Not since my divorce." Eleanor blinked. "Is that a yes?" A slow smile spread across Jack's face. "Yes, Eleanor. I'd be honored to be your date." Relief and happiness flooded through her. "Really?" "Really," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. His palm was warm against hers, but on one condition. "What's that?" she asked, suddenly nervous again. "Let me take you to dinner this weekend. A proper dinner, not just coffee at your kitchen table." His eyes were twinkling. "If we're going to a wedding together, we should at least have one real date first, don't you think?" Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I think that sounds perfect." As Jack left that evening, he stopped at the door and looked back at her. "You know, I've fixed a lot of things in this house, but I think you might be fixing something in me." Long after he had gone, Eleanor stood in her kitchen, the wedding invitation in one hand and Jack's business card in the other, feeling as nervous and excited as a young girl with her first crush. Saturday evening arrived too slowly for Eleanor. She had spent the day in a state of nervous excitement, changing her outfit 3 times before settling on a deep blue dress she had bought years ago, but rarely worn. She had even visited the salon in town for the first time in months, getting her silver hair styled and her nails done. At exactly 7, her doorbell rang. When Eleanor opened the door, she almost didn't recognize Jack. Gone was the plumbing uniform, replaced by a charcoal gray jacket over a light blue shirt. His hair was neatly combed, and he smelled of a subtle cologne. "You look beautiful," Jack said, his eyes taking in her appearance with obvious appreciation. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Jack offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength beneath his jacket. He led her to his car, not the work van she was used to seeing in her driveway, but a well-kept sedan. "I made reservations at Bella Luna," Jack said as he opened the car door for her. I hope Italian is okay. It's perfect, Eleanor replied, touched that he'd chosen one of the nicer restaurants in town. The restaurant was dimly lit with candles on each table. The hostess led them to a corner booth where they could see the whole restaurant but still have privacy. Eleanor noticed a few curious glances from other diners but was surprised to find she didn't mind. I haven't been on a real date in over 40 years, she admitted after they ordered. I feel like a teenager again. Jack's eyes crinkled when he smiled. I've had a few first dates since my divorce, but none I was looking forward to as much as this one. Their conversation flowed easily as they shared a bottle of red wine. Jack told stories about his years working as a plumber, the strange things he'd found in pipes, the interesting people he'd met. Eleanor shared memories of her teaching career and raising her children. Tell me about your daughter, Jack said, the one getting married. Eleanor's face softened. Lisa is my youngest. She's 32, works as a graphic designer. She and David have been together for 5 years. He's a good man, kind, hardworking. Tom would have approved. You miss him at times like this, Jack said gently. It wasn't a question. Eleanor nodded. I thought we'd grow old together, dance at our children's weddings, spoil grandchildren. She looked down at her wine glass. I still talk to him sometimes when I'm alone in the house. Jack reached across the table and took her hand. I think that's normal. The people we love never really leave us. His thumb traced small circles on her palm, sending a pleasant warmth up her arm. Eleanor met his eyes and saw understanding there, not pity. Enough sad talk, she said, squeezing his hand. Tell me about this suit you haven't worn in 8 years. Jack laughed. I bought it for my daughter Megan's college graduation. It probably still has the program in the pocket. As they shared a tiramisu for dessert, Eleanor found herself studying Jack's face, the laugh lines around his eyes, the silver at his temples, the strong line of his jaw. He was handsome in a lived-in way, a face that showed its experiences. What are you thinking? He asked, catching her gaze. That I'm glad my bathroom started leaking, she answered honestly. Outside the restaurant, the night air was cool. Jack draped his jacket over Eleanor's shoulders as they walked to the car. The weight of it felt comforting, and she breathed in his scent from the fabric. The drive back to her house was quiet, a comfortable silence between them. When they reached her door, Eleanor felt suddenly nervous again. Would you like to come in for coffee? She asked. Jack smiled. I would, but I think I should head home. We have 6 weeks until the wedding. That's plenty of time for more coffee. Eleanor understood what he wasn't saying. They had time to take things slow, to do this right. It made her respect him even more. Thank you for a wonderful evening, she said. Jack took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The pleasure was all mine, Eleanor. Then, before she could anticipate it, he leaned forward and placed a soft kiss on her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. I'll call you tomorrow, he promised. Eleanor watched him drive away, her hand touching the spot where he had kissed her, feeling a glow that started there and spread throughout her body. Inside her house, she kicked off her shoes and twirled slowly in her living room, hugging Jack's jacket that he had forgotten around her shoulders. The weeks before the wedding passed in a happy blur for Eleanor. She and Jack went on more dates, dinners, movies, and long walks in the park with his golden retriever, Max. They talked on the phone almost every evening. When Jack had a day off, he came over to fix little things around Eleanor's house that didn't really need fixing. One day, Lisa called to confirm final details for the wedding. So, Mom, it'll just be you, right? For the seating chart. Eleanor took a deep breath. Actually, I'm bringing someone. The phone went silent for a moment. You're bringing a date? Mom, who is it? His name is Jack. Eleanor paused, not sure how to describe him. He's a friend who's become important to me. Mom, this is huge. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I need to add him to everything. After answering her daughter's excited questions, Eleanor called Jack. I told Lisa about you coming to the wedding. I hope that's still okay. Of course it is, Jack said, but now I'm nervous. Meeting your family is a big step. As the wedding weekend approached, Eleanor and Jack went shopping for clothes. He needed a new suit, and she wanted a special dress for the occasion. At the department store, Eleanor tried on several outfits, while Jack waited patiently outside the fitting room. What do you think of this one? She asked, stepping out in a pale pink dress that fell just below her knees. Jack's expression was serious as he studied her. It's nice, but not quite right. After trying on 5 more dresses, Eleanor was getting discouraged. Then the saleswoman brought in a silvery blue gown with delicate beading around the neckline. When Eleanor put it on, she knew it was perfect before she even looked in the mirror. She stepped out of the fitting room, and Jack's face told her everything. He stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving her. "Eleanor," he said softly, "you look absolutely beautiful." The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Jack arrived at Eleanor's house early, dressed in his new charcoal suit and blue tie that matched her dress. When she opened the door, they both stood still for a moment, taking each other in. "Ready for this?" Jack asked, offering his arm. Eleanor nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. "As long as you're with me." The ceremony was being held at a hotel in the city. As they drove, Eleanor told Jack about the family members he would meet, giving him little details to help him navigate the crowd. Her son Mark would be there with his wife and 2 children, Tom's brothers and their wives, her sister Patricia, who always had too much to drink at weddings. "What about your former in-laws?" Jack asked. Eleanor sighed. "Tom's parents are both gone now, but his sister Judith will be there. She still thinks no one was good enough for her brother." Jack squeezed her hand. "Well, I think you're more than good enough for anyone." When they arrived at the hotel, Eleanor felt a moment of panic. This was the first family event since Tom died. Everyone would be watching, judging, pitying. Jack must have sensed her anxiety because he squeezed her hand. "We can do this. Just remember, I'm right beside you." They walked into the hotel lobby, and almost immediately Eleanor heard someone call her name. Her son Mark strode toward them, his face curious as he noticed Jack. "Mom, you look amazing," Mark said, hugging her. Then he turned to Jack with a questioning expression. "Mark, this is Jack Miller," Eleanor said, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. "Jack, this is my son Mark." The 2 men shook hands, sizing each other up. "Nice to meet you," Mark said. "So, how do you know my mother?" Before Jack could answer, Mark's children ran up, excited to see their grandmother. In a happy confusion of hugs and exclamations about how much they had grown, the awkward question was forgotten. As they made their way to the ceremony room, Eleanor introduced Jack to more family members. Some looked surprised, others pleased, a few confused. Jack was warm and friendly with everyone, telling easy stories about how they met, making Eleanor sound both capable and charming in his descriptions of her calling him for plumbing repairs. Just before they took their seats, Jack leaned close to Eleanor's ear. "You're doing great," he whispered, "and everyone can see how happy you are." Eleanor realized he was right. For the first time in years, she wasn't just going through the motions at a family gathering. She was truly present, truly happy, and having Jack beside her made all the difference. The wedding ceremony was beautiful. Lissa looked radiant in her white gown, and her new husband couldn't take his eyes off her. Eleanor felt tears in her eyes as they exchanged vows. Jack quietly handed her his handkerchief, his shoulder warm against hers in the pew. At the reception, Eleanor and Jack were seated at a table with her son Mark, his wife, and Tom's sister Judith. At first, the conversation was stiff and awkward. Judith kept glancing at Jack with narrowed eyes. "So Jack, what exactly do you do?" Judith finally asked during the salad course. "I'm a plumber," he answered simply. "Have been for over 30 years now." Judith raised an eyebrow and looked at Eleanor. "How interesting, and how did you 2 meet?" Before Eleanor could speak, Jack smiled. "I fixed her bathroom sink. Best service call of my career." Mark laughed, warming to Jack. "Mom always did have trouble with that old plumbing system." The tension slowly eased as Jack told funny stories about his work and asked thoughtful questions about the family. By the time the main course arrived, even Judith was smiling reluctantly at his jokes. When the band started playing, Jack turned to Eleanor. "Would you like to dance?" Eleanor hesitated. She and Tom had loved dancing, but she hadn't danced since his death. "I'm not sure I remember how." "It's like riding a bicycle," Jack said, standing and offering his hand. "And I promise to catch you if you fall." On the dance floor, Jack held her with gentle confidence. The music was a slow ballad, and Eleanor found herself relaxing into his arms. They moved together smoothly, as if they had danced 100 times before. "Everyone is watching us," Eleanor whispered, noticing the curious glances. "Let them watch," Jack replied softly. They're just seeing what I already know, how remarkable you are. From across the room, Eleanor caught her daughter's eye. Lisa was beaming at them, nudging her new husband and pointing subtly. Eleanor felt a warm glow spreading through her chest, a feeling of rightness she hadn't expected. As the evening progressed, they danced more, ate cake, and mingled with guests. Jack charmed Eleanor's friends with his stories and made her grandchildren laugh with silly jokes. By the end of the night, he seemed like he had always been part of the family. During the last slow dance, Jack held Eleanor closer. I have a confession to make, he said, his voice low near her ear. What's that? Eleanor asked, suddenly nervous. I think I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. I know it's fast, and I know we both have complicated pasts, but being with you these past weeks has been the happiest I've been in years. Eleanor stopped dancing, looking up into his sincere eyes. Around them, other couples continued moving to the music, but they stood still in their own private moment. Jack, she began, then stopped, overwhelmed by emotion. I don't know what to say. His smile was gentle. You don't have to say anything, I just wanted you to know. They drove home in comfortable silence, fingers intertwined on the console between them. When they reached Eleanor's house, Jack walked her to the door as he always did. Thank you for today, Eleanor said. You made what could have been a difficult day into something wonderful. Jack looked at her with such tenderness that Eleanor's heart swelled. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned down and kissed her. His lips were warm and gentle against hers. Eleanor felt herself responding, her hand reaching up to touch his face. When they finally parted, both were a little breathless. I should go, Jack said, though he made no move to leave. You could stay, Eleanor suggested quietly, surprising herself with her boldness. For coffee, Jack smiled, understanding her meaning. Are you sure? Eleanor nodded. I think I'm falling in love with you too, Jack Miller, and at our age we shouldn't waste time pretending otherwise. Inside, they sat close together on her sofa, talking softly about the wedding, their feelings, their fears. When Jack finally kissed her again, Eleanor felt like a woman half her age, full of hope and possibility. His hands were gentle as they framed her face, his eyes asking permission for each new touch. We can take this as slow as you want, he whispered. Eleanor smiled against his lips. We've both waited long enough for happiness, don't you think? Later, as moonlight filtered through her bedroom curtains, Eleanor rested her head on Jack's chest, listening to his heartbeat. His arm around her was strong and secure. For the first time in years, she felt completely at peace, completely at home. What are you thinking? Jack asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. That sometimes the most unexpected leaks can lead to the most beautiful floods, Eleanor replied, lifting her face for another kiss. 3 months after the wedding, Eleanor was in her garden, planting tulip bulbs for spring. The autumn air was crisp, and colorful leaves drifted down around her. From inside the house, she could hear Jack hammering something in the kitchen. He had been replacing the old cabinet handles, insisting they needed an update. So much had changed since that first leaky faucet. Jack spent most nights at Eleanor's house now, though he still kept his own place. His golden retriever Max had become a regular visitor too, sleeping on a special bed in the corner of Eleanor's bedroom. They had fallen into an easy routine together, comfortable as old friends yet exciting as new lovers. Eleanor pushed her trowel into the soft earth, making a hole for another bulb. She thought about how different her life was now from just a few months ago. Her days were no longer quiet and empty but filled with conversation, laughter, and plans. She and Jack had tickets for a cruise in the spring. They had joined a ballroom dancing class together. Next week, they were driving to Colorado to visit his daughter Megan. Eleanor? Jack called from the back door. Phone call. It's Lisa. Eleanor brushed dirt from her hands and went inside. Jack handed her the phone with a kiss on her cheek, then returned to his cabinet project. Mom. Lisa sounded excited. I have big news. What is it, honey? Eleanor asked, smiling at Jack across the kitchen. We're having a baby. You're going to be a grandmother again. Joy flooded through Eleanor. Oh, Lisa, that's wonderful. After talking through all the details, Lisa was due in May. She felt fine except for morning sickness. They didn't want to know if it was a boy or girl. Eleanor hung up and shared the news with Jack. "Congratulations, Grandma," he said, pulling her into a hug. "This calls for a celebration." That evening, they opened a bottle of wine in the backyard. The air was getting chilly, so Jack built a small fire in the pit. They sat side by side on the bench, watching the flames dance. "I've been thinking," Jack said, his voice serious. "About us?" Eleanor felt a small flutter of nervousness. "What about us?" Jack took her hand, his thumb running over her knuckles. "I spend most nights here. Max has his own bed. Half my clothes are in your closet. Are you saying you want to take some back?" Eleanor asked, trying to keep her tone light. Jack laughed, "Just the opposite. I was thinking maybe I should give up my place entirely, move in properly." He paused, looking into her eyes. "If you want that too." Eleanor felt warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the fire. "Are you asking to move in with me, Jack Miller?" "I am," he said, suddenly looking a little nervous. "I know it's a big step." Eleanor leaned over and kissed him softly. "Yes. I want that too." Jack's face relaxed into a smile, but then grew serious again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I was going to wait, but maybe this is the perfect moment after all." Eleanor's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring with a small blue stone that matched her eyes. "Eleanor," Jack said, his voice low and sincere. "I never expected to find love again at my age, but from the moment you opened your door that first day, something changed for me. You've brought joy and meaning back into my life." He took the ring from the box. "I'm not asking for marriage, not yet anyway, but I am asking for a promise. A promise that we'll face whatever comes next together. That we'll build a life together for however many years we have." Tears filled Eleanor's eyes as Jack slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "It's a promise," she whispered, her voice catching. "The easiest promise I've ever made." Jack pulled her close, and they sat wrapped in each other's arms by the fire, talking about practical things like when he would give notice on his apartment and where his books would go in her house. Their plans expanded to include Lisa's baby, holidays with both their families, and a garden redesign for spring. Later that night, as they lay in bed together, Eleanor looked at the ring sparkling in the moonlight from the window. Jack was already asleep beside her, his breathing deep and steady. Eleanor thought about the strange path that had led her here, how a leaky faucet had changed everything, how at 64 she had found herself making a shocking request of her plumber that led to love, companionship, and a second chance at happiness. She snuggled closer to Jack, feeling his arm tighten around her even in sleep. Tomorrow they would begin moving his things. Tomorrow they would truly begin their life together. Eleanor closed her eyes, looking forward to morning for the first time in years.